Peter Elides with you. This is Stock Market Cycles Update for the week ending Friday, December 4th, being recorded Sunday, December 6th. We'll get into the stock market in a moment. And by the way, this update is being done for both our paying subscribers who get updates every single day, virtually every day anyway, and those YouTube subscribers who actually get these updates for nothing. We promise to do about 3 or 4 of those a month. I don't know if we've kept up on that schedule, but this is probably an appropriate time to share one of our updates with our YouTube audience. So we're doing that today at the end of this week. Before we get to the stock market, we've had a request from one of our subscribers, one of our paying subscribers, if we look at the US dollar. So I have a chart up here of EUR-USD, which is the euro versus the dollar. And the offset that we're looking at now is a 48.4 to 55.3 10-week, the equivalent of a 10-week offset for a nominal 20-week projection. And as you can see, we've just reached into that projection window the past couple of days. And in fact, we have exceeded it here. So the question becomes, is there a longer-term offset that would account for higher projections? The answer is that there is, but unfortunately, it's not going to be very helpful. It's the equivalent of a 2-year offset, 482.3 to 530.5, and this is what it shows. We've also reached into that projection window, but look how large the projection window is. This again is the euro versus the dollar, 1.202 all the way up to 128.19. And the reason this box is so big, when you see a big projection box like that, you say, that's not going to do me much good. Well, it is going to do you some good, but here's the reason for it. Let's look at the web chart. Look at the huge size of this continuum. And that's simply a function of, let's show you the short-term offset and the long-term offset. You see, when you start moving this short-term offset over so that it finally meets the longer-term offset, we have to account for all the space that covers in between. And so you can say that we crossed above it down here at the lowest point. That would give you this lower end of the projection, which is 1.202. And if you crossed at the higher point way up here, that gives you the much higher projection up to 1.28, 185. So that's why this is such a large projection window, and that's what we're looking at in terms of the euro versus the US dollar. I hope that's been somewhat helpful to the person that asked for it. Okay, let's look at the stock market. Okay, this is a 10-day moving average of the equity put-call ratio. Obviously, when we're way up here, that means a lot of people are buying puts and anticipating a big market decline. You very seldom see it get up that far, but this was back at the bottom in March of this year, okay? And that's when people were very bearish. But look at what extreme we've gone to now. Let me put in a horizontal cursor here. Okay. This is where we are as of this week. 10-day average equity put-call ratio. The last time we were this low was right back here. That's back in 2000, folks. And you know what happened after 2000. And let's take a look at other times when it's gotten low. Actually, at the 2007 high, it didn't get that low. So we're even lower now than we were at the 2007 high before about a 55-57% decline. So not only with this put-call ratio, but with other sentiment figures such as Investors Intelligence, where we now have been over 60% bulls for a few weeks in a row, and a difference between bulls and bears that has been, I think, as great now as it was at the top in January of 18. So there are some danger signals being given. And we say that because we're going to look at projections now And although there still are projections and fairly significantly higher ones, it doesn't mean you get to them in the next few days or even the next few weeks. We are looking for a major market top probably in 2021, probably in the first quarter of 2021, and I would even go further and say possibility of January of 2021. But these are all things that we'll talk about at a later time. I want you to know that although the cycle's projections have tracked this market beautifully, I hope you agree with me, we have not been looking for any large market decline. We're waiting for all the upside projections to be met, and that has not happened as yet. So let's look at some of the projections. First, we want to know if we've met all upside projections. In fact, let me look at something else first. Okay, we've been looking at this chart now for several days, talking about the combinations of trend lines and parallel channel lines that were being hit over a 2 or 3 day period right here at the December, just as we came into December 1, 2, and 3, reaching right up to these trend lines and parallel channel lines. One parallel channel line, parallel of this blue line right here. And we stalled there for a few days, 2 or 3 days. But now as of Friday, we broke above there. That could be a positive sign, even as extended as we are, for the market here. And so the reason we're going to be looking at our highest projections is because this might be some kind of breakout above these lines and the upper parallel channel line, which could have proven to be pretty good resistance. In fact, we said over the past 2 or 3 days, this was the first time in this period right in here of these 3 days where the market had an excuse to pull back. Not a major high, but an excuse to pull back because it had reached these lines and maybe come down here, base a little bit again for another move to get above those lines in the channel. But it happened on Friday. Now, this is not a huge decisive move above. We'd expect to see a couple of more days, and we could, of course, have a 1 day or 2 day turnaround and go back below the lines again. But I think there's a decent chance we're going to stay above there because we're in a period of bullish seasonality too. So I wanted to show you this technical chart and the little breakthrough that we had on Friday. Not decisive yet, but a pretty good pre-omen, a pretty good indication. Now let's look at the projections. Okay, this is the equivalent of a 20-week offset on the S&P. We've showed this to you before. This projection has been in effect all the way back. It was confirmed at the end of July, the beginning of August. It was never threatened. Prices never really came close to falling below the offsets. So this projection remains very much in effect. And it calls for a minimum move to 4150.08 in the S&P. So I did some quick calculations from today's closing price, or Friday's closing price, to the lower end of the projection for the S&P would be a move of 12.2%. Okay, these are, by the way, these are intraday extreme prices. I did the same thing on the Dow. The Dow closed at 30,218.26, and the lower side of this equivalent projection was 34,153.56. And that's a 13% gain. The problem we've had for quite a while now is reconciling that with the NDX, which has generally been the market leader. And the NDX did not have this equivalent nominal 40-week projection. What it did have, though, and we'll show it to you now, is, okay, so this is what the NDX does have outstanding. In fact, we've almost met the lower end of it. But I'm more interested in this case in the upper end of it because I'm trying to find a way to reconcile how the Dow and the S&P can move up 10, 12%. And is there that kind of equivalent or almost equivalent move on the NDX? So the upper side of the NDX on this daily chart is 13,542.68. That represents a gain of 8% from the Friday close of 12,528.48. In fact, we can go one step further. I like to break these down from time to time and go to the equivalent projection. Let's look at a 65-minute chart and look at this equivalent projection. Okay, here's the equivalent offset. Let's show you the offset. It's 72.6 to 82.8. If you look at the equivalent offsets we have on the website, you will see that that's the equivalent of a 24.2 to 27.6. That's the equivalent of a 5-week offset for a nominal 10-week projection. And this one gives even a slightly higher projection, 12,967.81. That would represent a 9.0% gain. So there's a pretty close approximation there, 9% versus 12 and 13% on the S&P and the Dow. And so I think these are numbers that will probably be hit sometime going into late December, the early part of next year. As I said earlier, I think there's a decent chance that we see a very major high in early 2021. There are lots of reasons for that. We're not going to go into those now. So I wanted to show you that. The only other thing I'll show you is the question becomes the short term. Do we have some short-term projections that we might expect to see, and we might get actually some kind of small pullback from there? Okay, this is the S&P, and as you can see, we finally, let's do a little close-up here, zoom in. Just barely missed it on Thursday, but Friday of this past week, we got in. This is a 12.1 to 13.8 offset, the equivalent of 2.5 weeks for a nominal 5-week projection. We did get into the window on Friday. So again, anytime you get into a short-term projection window, you're facing the possibility of some kind of at least short-term pullback. Could be a more important one if there are no higher projections. But as we just showed you, there are indeed higher projections. Let's look at this same offset on the NASDAQ 100. Okay, here's the 12.1, 13.8 on the NDX. And as you can see, this has not been reached. 12,595.42 is the lower end of the projection. And the highest point we've reached over the last 2 days has been 12,539 was Thursday's high, rounded off. So very close, but not there yet. I would expect to see at least this lower end of this projection met before we saw any kind of a pullback. And again, do not expect any kind of large pullback. Although anytime you enter projection windows, you can look for some kind of, at least short-term, the possibility of a short-term market reversal. All right, that's basically it for the weekend. Hope we've shown you things of interest to you. And we'll have a regular update Monday afternoon, evening. Thanks for watching.